having my back right at the door, right? That's just
That's exactly right. Very good.
Let's have this on this meeting. Okay.
All right.
So do you know how many is coming in?
Let's see. I do know. Well, I guess Con will be participating remotely. So will Gretchen. Let me go see about the remote people because it's not set up to receive them. The remote participants all on the phone. Yeah. Are they going to do a package?
They have, I saw them, they have like.
Oh, they have like, okay, they'll be signing on.
That's what I said.
Okay. Okay, so maybe we should just start. How long are we doing this for?
So this is going to be.
For an hour.
Yes.
Okay. I'm assuming they're gonna get signed because there's a number of them.
Yeah, let me get in touch with my team and see if there's anything that I need to do.
Let me just go make sure someone, because it doesn't look like this is hooked up right, does it?
Yeah, I just sent the message to our tech person, waiting to see if they're gonna respond.
Respond? I
Yeah.
was just gonna ask Karen or someone.
Okay, Karen.
Just right over there. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Let me take the list, just so I know who we're talking about. Like 2 or 3 of them on virtual.
Yeah.
And can you ask Philip, are you on
Let's
this?
see, I went in the wrong one. Let's see. Okay, so you need me to go back on Teams and talk to Philip.
We'll figure out how to do it today and then we'll know how to do it tomorrow.
Okay, let's see.
You would think that I have like complete mastery of Zoom after doing it all during the pandemic. Let's see here. Breakouts.
Oh, it should be session 2.
Maybe we just need to join.
Yeah, if y'all would join,
Yeah, I'm in
we just
there.
need to figure out how to get the room joined. And that's what I don't know how to do.
Okay, let me.
Do you know how to do that?
Yeah, so I don't know, I don't want to touch anything, but
I don't know how to get the link on.
Maybe I can dial it in.
Trying to figure out how to join a breakout room. And maybe they're sitting in a
There's
room
a-
waiting for us.
They're waiting for us, so that's.
I don't see,
Well, there's not a breakout room out of the main webinar, so you have a new Zoom link.
yeah.
So,
that's what I'm trying
and
to-
that should be on your copy. I sent it to you yesterday.
Oh, let me find it.
The agenda I sent out yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago.
Oh, that version.
Yeah.
It's right
Because
here.
I
I
said,
might even have it open.
put this on your computer so you have
Here
the
it is.
links. So go
Here
to
it
the
is.
last page.
Last page.
Oh, there you are. Go back up. Is this
Group
group two?
Yeah. This
So
is
go
no-
to, yeah,
let me
go
see.
to that Zoom.
See if
There's,
it's-
it's up there. Scroll up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Group three.
Pointed that out.
You're group three.
Group 3, I got it.
Okay.
Group 3, here it is, right here. Day
Philip's
one.
on his way over here.
Okay, good.
Help show us how to do this.
Open. You see that? If you go from the thing, from the Zoom, join, leave and join. Oh, that's it. I'm leaving the big group, and now I'm getting into our group.
Okay.
And it's on, oh,
Oh, I'm in there now.
you in?
Mm-hmm.
Good, I'm coming. Join webinar. Yay!
Now we just gotta get it on the screen.
Okay, we're on there. Where's the rest of them? I see you and me. Look at ourselves.
So you see the room.
We're in the room.
Okay, you're in the room. Okay, I just need to correspond with all the rest of the people.
Yeah, I gotta get the rest of them.
Yeah,
They need to join their Zoom links.
yeah.
These Zoom links, right?
Okay, and then our tech is coming and get us on the TV.
On the screen, okay, good. Good, wow, that's good. You've got good connections there. It's funny how I guess closed captioning. Now I've left the big group. And I'm in our group. Maybe we should just start talking about this, right? I mean, you can't do anything about what you can't control, right?
Right.
Okay. Highlights would do that.
Well, it looked like they're running around trying to figure out how to patch people in. Opportunities and bottlenecks for advancing the bioeconomy. Discuss priority research areas that could advance the bioeconomy across areas such as climate change, agriculture, food, supply chain resilience, human health, and enabling crosscuts. Report out on when these discussions will occur in the next session. Questions are, what opportunities can be leveraged to advance priority research areas for the bioeconomy? What bottlenecks must be overcome? Host would like to promote you to
Hi, guys.
panelist.
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Hello, I
We
hear
hear
you
you.
as well,
Can you
Tom.
see me?
Hey, Tom, we finally connected. You got,
Yeah,
we're
they
connected.
set up the link in a funky way.
Yeah, okay.
That's good. So you guys are set.
Well, good. You've solved it. Thank you.
Can you
I
see me as
didn't.
well?
Somebody did.
Okay.
saw that I'd been promoted to being
Yeah.
a panelist.
Yeah,
So
we've been promoted to panelists, yeah.
That's a double-edged sword, Gretchen.
We're panelists. We're not ad hoc anymore. Okay, you guys have the charge to our committee
Yeah.
and the questions.
Yes.
Let's start with question 1. Are we ready?
You're right.
What opportunities can be leveraged to advance priority research areas for the bioeconomy? In the great sea of things that are out there. You know, one thing that occurred to me just listening to those presentations was there was a paper, it's still a big buzz around it, where people were generating, no, I shouldn't say people, people discovered that bacteria that can be used to treat wastewater generate electricity. Now, you know, that's like 2 birds with 1 stone. I don't think it's a lot of electricity. The question is, how do you ramp something that up? But, you know, these are kind of things that have really big potential for the bioeconomy. Anything that, you know, addresses the whole energy supply, and of course, wastewater treatment is another really big area. So something like that just really resonated with me.
Well, I want to pick up on your theme of water. And we're seeing all these studies about the decline in the aquifers out west. And that's going along with this, and now there's declines in corn production in some of those western states. So, you know, if we didn't really need another example of how climate change is having massive effects on just about everything. I mean, all of Canada burnt this year, right? I mean, I don't know how we leverage that, but certainly the urgency of the situation has been drawn to our attention, vividly demonstrated.
Yeah, I'm 100% with Rob. And I think that one of the issues, oh, sorry.
Oh,
Can
go
you
ahead.
guys hear me? Okay, sorry. I lift my hand. Sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I'm 100% with Rob, and that part of the issue that I think we are not discussing so much is not how we're going to be mitigating the effects of global change, but how we're going to be doing something to continue to be worse. And I think monetization of carbon is something where NSF should certainly be more involved.
Can I go? I agree.
Yes.
And I'm going to just extend the conversation a little farther and a little wackier, if I can, on the issue of energy and water. The largest current consumer of water and energy right now are the giant GPU farms that are fueling all of the AI stuff. This is a bit of an issue, okay? One of the other observations off on the left side is that living systems do compute with astronomically greater efficiency, something that will affect both the bioeconomy as well as some biofutures, is understanding and unlocking the compute horsepower of natural systems. And I don't just mean a human brain, which runs on 100 watts, which is nothing. But that is a fundamental issue. It's cross-discipline. It will need AI, and hopefully it'll make AI less expensive. Just a heads up that, our reliance, I am computational, so I always think about these things. But I think our reliance on AI is not going to go away. It's only going to accelerate. The use of GPU doubled. The number of GPU farms doubled in a half a year in the United States. The consumption of water in those tripled. That's greater than Moore's law. So I just want to put a plug in. Something nature does, we need to unlock that.
So Tom, what kind of biological systems are we talking about, or organismal systems are we talking about that would be feeding this GPU farms?
There's no, you wouldn't feed the GPU farm. I mean, it's an open topic area. It's a decade-long sort of research issue that's not going to happen in a year. But the reality is that things that compute, that do information processing with proteins, do it super efficiently. And proteins just are a different beast than transistors. So there's some potential for protein compute, some potential for biohybrid compute. Lots of stuff in that area that is not the domain of NIH, right?
So Tom, can you educate me a bit on these on this water consumption? Is this water that simply gets heated? Is it water that gets evaporated? Is it water that can be reused and recycled?
It is largely water used for coolant. The problem is there's thoughts of locating GPU farms in the ocean, which worries me because they're just going to heat the ocean. I mean, no matter what, they're generating incredible levels of heat. So water is dominantly used as coolant. The GPUs that we have are all water cooled. And they recycle the water, but you need to pour water into them in the first place. And each GPU is a consumer of water.
And that water will cool down at the expense of heating the surrounding environment.
Yeah. Thermodynamics is our friend or enemy.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put that out there. And this also has with it, how do we harness AI talent and talent in the computational world? And definitely pulling on Suzanne's argument, which I totally agree with, is that compute is also the great equalizer if it's accessible. So training to get over these bottlenecks and how do we solve really hard problems. So that was a bit of a bandwagon. I'm sorry, I should stop.
We're back to broadband access being equitable, which certainly is not at this point.
Yeah, but that will come up in the second breakout when we talk about infrastructure needs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know who's moderating, but Gretchen, your hand's up.
Okay, I'll jump in. So just, I think another agency that has basically handled it and NSF has stayed away is remote sensing. And I think the most exciting sort of ecosystem analytics that I've seen recently have had remote sensing at their heart. And I think that's also, they're obviously it's going to use a lot of GPUs too, but once you get the information can be processed by so many people. And it's just getting so fine. It's getting so fine that you can even sense like the biodiversity of fungi and microbes underground. So I think that the further refinement and capture of the talent that is using remote sensing is something that NSF should really undertake.
I'll go ahead. I just raised my hand. I'm just I wrote some notes earlier. I actually read this stuff. There's this other challenge that we have in living systems. Obviously, they're highly complex and they are highly multi-scale. And we're still behind on our ability to link our understanding of things that may occur at the molecular and atomistic scale to things that occur at larger scale and the reverse direction. So predictive models that are multi-scale are profoundly important. I can give an example of one, which is molecular dynamics models operate at sort of atomistic and femtosecond scale. The protein folding problem operates at a much larger scale, but there's no dynamics. So even though we're really excited about protein folding, the real dynamics are how proteins interact with each other, as well as how they interact with therapeutics and things. So that's just a simple one. And then how protein interactions dominate cell behavior, it just keeps going up. So I think it's a real roadblock to get that linkage across scales, a principled way of doing so. It may be an AI-driven process. It's a little hard to say. So I just want to add that as something that is shared across multiple complex, dynamical living systems. And this goes all the way, Gretchen, to ecosystem, right? Obviously, because that is highly multi-scale with atmospherics and everything. So again, predictive models.
That points out a challenge, of course, in creating the workforce or the academic force. People have to, if the problems are across scales, our training is typically not across scales. And that represents a huge challenge.
Really.
Yeah, but some of the training does. I mean, if you train a student in just the basics of coding and interpreting data and being able to manage large data sets, you can give them proteins and you can give them continents, and essentially they'll learn the vocabulary quickly enough to be able to contribute, I think. So I mean, students I've seen who would really have, they'd never been able to model before, but all of a sudden they can contribute to models and they know how to clean data, and it doesn't matter whether it's biochemical or sub-biochemical or ecological.
Yeah. Hearing Gretchen, my thought turned to all the things that my students figure out that I'm unable to figure out on technology, and how much faster. So you're right. If we just can give, more young people access to the resources they need to figure this stuff out, they will, and that'll advance the bioeconomy, just that in itself, compared to old guys like me.
The key, though, is getting them excited about it and willing to stay in STEM, I believe. So they need to see, various aspects of what they're working on at the keyboard. And I think that's one of our jobs, is really to show them the range.
Well, again, we're back to this workforce challenge. Dartmouth is now going through this unionization thing. And, there's a very broad range of discussions, but it certainly would seem that the old model of get in the lab and stay there till late at night every night and get back there early in the morning seems to be going away. People want to turn this much more into a 9-to-5 kind of career. And so getting people into STEM and getting them to stay in STEM we're going to need different incentives, because it seems that the old incentives are no longer adequate motivationally.
Yeah, but if they can do things a lot faster than their professors.
Well, that's for sure.
Yeah, then, maybe they can get a lot done in a much shorter workday. Yes, I guess the question is, how would you set up some laboratories, like they could even be distributed like laboratories where you give students challenges like this to work on and see what kind of solutions they come up with. Kind of reminds me of the little sandbox, ideas labs that NSF was doing to get, ideas for how to harness the data revolution. That was one I participated in, but with much younger people. So you take advantage of, all of that technological skill that they have.
Well, thinking about priorities, one of the priorities that jumped out at me from this 60-page document was replacing feedstocks with feedstocks that aren't as environmentally damaging to get. It's a petrochemical thing. I mean, we know we know that that's not a long-term solution. And so using the bioeconomy to generate the things, to build the things that we need, the chemicals that we need, and the novel chemicals that we need, struck me as ought to be a high priority. That's, changing that economy. Now that's going to be politically challenging, of course, because we've seen there are entrenched interests. But if we involve the petrochemical companies so they're the beneficiaries of this changeover, then probably we'll reduce that political resistance.
I might just go back to the sort of the word opportunities, which sort of linking that to priorities. What I'm seeing a lot of are sort of these more chimeric or engineered cell types, engineered plant cells, engineered mammalian cells that do things for us, obviously. There's also, engineering plants to be resilient in climate change. I forgot who brought that up. Eric, I think you did. So there are really big new advances in sort of synthetic cell biology as opposed to synthetic biology. And there's lots of things that may be more like organoid related. And so there's just a lot going on there. And I think it's a unique opportunity to bridge, advances in gene editing, advances in our understanding of the dynamics toward good. Okay. It's like AI for good. There's sort of engineered cells for good. It would be a wonderful thing for societal and human benefit. And that includes food security, livestock, resilience to change, all of these things. So it's a challenging time. So I added that as an opportunity because I think the tech is there.
And this, speaking of, and this may be off the wall, but I think we are getting pretty good and pretty close to large scale carbon capture. And then I heard just driving into work the other day that Occidental, not the college, but the petroleum company, has figured out a way to take the carbon that they capture and make, again, fuel that they will then burn. And they're calling this carbon neutral. And it strikes me that, the biology community should have better ideas for what to do with that carbon once they capture it. And maybe just a better way of accounting. And it better be done soon because the logical thing is to capture it and burn it again.
Yeah, so one of the big carbon capture industries that's developing in the South, in lots of parts of the South, is this, it's carbon capture based, but it's called blue carbon. So they generate this carbon, they scrape this carbon out of these industrial, operations, and then they concentrate it. And what they're doing is they're injecting it back underground. But it's just one of these things that, is creating problems for some of these communities where this stuff is being injected, because it's not, these are porous layers of rock and stuff like this. And that carbon is kind of making its way back into back into the surface geology. So, yeah, I think that these really, fast and popular solutions that are out there right now, they're better solutions that we could come up with, but that's really important for all of the carbon capture stuff that I've been reading about.
And it could be a real opportunity. I mean, it should be an opportunity.
Well, and that was my point before. I think that the only way to make this an opportunity is really to allow somebody to make money out of it. Because if money is not being made, then it's just not going to work. And I think that that's probably something that most funding agencies should be really interested in funding. It's not necessarily how to make the products, but how to make some technologies that creates an opportunity of getting profit from the CO2 and other greenhouse gases that are converted into chemicals.
Yeah, there's some, or converted into things like new cement, or
Yeah,
there's
that's right.
structural things, and there's biomaterial things that are both advantageous for capture, but also advantageous for structure. And so you can make money. I agree, Eric, that monetizing things, much as I'm a purist on science, it is a driver, and you have to recognize it. Yeah.
But
And that would
I
be
must
that
say,
was also the case for the engineered cell types. That has
Right.
huge commercial potential.
but I think timelines, Tom, is what worries me here. I mean, we don't have 20 years now, right? And companies, industry think in very short term. And we have a window of opportunity that's probably, I would say, 5 years to do something. But we're not thinking short term. NSF is not thinking short term. It is not within the philosophy of the agency to be thinking about what can be done tomorrow.
Yes and no.
It hasn't been. It hasn't been. I mean, maybe it's
Not
changing.
so much in the bio directorate, very much in the engineering directorate.
Yeah, sure.
That is how they kind of operate. They're much more aligned with industry interests. And it would be interesting to ask, is there an opportunity to get an industry advisory board specifically for the bio directorate? That might be an opportunity.
Yep.
Again, amplifying what everybody's saying here. We as a group are not particularly representative of that other sector of society.
Given that we're invoking the need for a for-profit motive, how are you going to generate an industry advisory board with the requisite expertise that isn't conflicted?
Oh, they'll be totally conflicted.
Yeah.
By definition. But every engineering research center, ERC, has an industry advisory board associated with it. It's basically, what are your needs, industry? That's it. And so can these be addressed? So they exist, and there's sort of ways of having industry be partner to things where they we still have rules about intellectual property being accessible to academia, sort of the more open licensing kinds of things, and that still allow for profit. But there, obviously there are ways it happens because they exist already in some form or another. But again, from the bio, I'm not particularly industry knowledgeable. I do have a startup company, but it's very teeny. But it's worth a thought. It's just another potential opportunity. And I think that's something Brett brought up of, who do we engage? Do we engage the scientific community? Absolutely. Do we engage industry? We need to. Do we engage philanthropy? We have been. And philanthropy is increasingly interested in partnering with NSF. That's a huge new shift.
And I would also argue that given the urgency, COVID should have taught us some lessons. because I think that that was a good example of where all sort of conflict of interest arose, right? And they haven't been solved yet, but they solved a really important problem for humanity in many ways.
They may have solved a major problem for Dartmouth Medical School as well, because the guy who found those mutations in the prolines that stabilized the spike protein was in our biochemistry department. And so and patented it. So there's a lot of money landing locally, which is very welcome. And it turns out he did the same thing. That was for his postdoc, and while he was here, for his PhD, he solved the same problem with RSV. And that's the basis of the vaccine that's coming out. This guy is like a genius.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what we need. We need more of those kind of geniuses.
So is the genius supply the bottleneck?
No, we need to figure out how to reproduce that genius, that kind of level of genius, and it's education, right? It's training.
It's also opportunity. I mean, are we giving opportunity for those geniuses to embark in the projects that NSF is normally funding? And I don't know if I would say yes.
Right, and I would also say, I'm not sure that this would necessarily be funding geniuses, but for institutions that typically, say MSIs that aren't successful with their NSF proposals. So one of the things, I mean, at least they know how to apply. Once you bring in industry partners and everything else, then the application process could get potentially much more complicated. So I think NSF still has to be able to be it's got to be one-stop shop for some, including my own institution, the larger undergraduate institutions. They need a way to apply easily to get this type of funding. And then if it's going to be spread out and diffuse and involve going to workshops, et cetera, that's going to exclude them.
Mm-hmm.
How effective is those initiatives to provide sponsored projects help to smaller institutions? How effective has that been? How successful in getting that out there?
You talking
I think
about
local organizations are good. For instance, I know I have colleagues at Cal State, Cal State's all over. And if they're in a place like Southern California where there is industry, and industry that is interested in what they're doing, then the contacts can be made. But I'm thinking about, southeastern Kansas. I'm not sure. I shouldn't have said that. Somebody may be from there. But, so I think that industry writ large is hard for undergraduate institutions spread out. And under-resourced, not just undergraduate, but under-resourced.
And I would argue that once again, COVID wasn't democratic. Solutions to COVID came from a few institutions, and I don't know if we think that there's a sense of urgency with climate change. Maybe we should be a little bit less sensitive about being all that democratic right now, or inclusive.
What I'm thinking about, though, is actually community demand can be very, very potent as a motivator. And so I want to be able to tap into that and then utilize it. And that could, so basically it is I agree that we need a genius with a methane eater right now. And actually there are some at Caltech, but essentially let's just say we make it through the next 5 years, we've got to have a workforce. So I believe that you get community demand. I think basically we can't afford to leave any source of energy, information, mental power. We can't afford that not to have it all. What are we supposed to be working on? Bottlenecks that we're thinking about?
Well, yeah, we kind of touched on some of that. Um, Talking about that, that's the second question. I thought we, so right, so one of the bottlenecks, right, is the capacity, develop the skills needed to do this kind of biotechnology research. And that, that involves training. And, the question is what kind of training and for whom? And we talked about the importance of making sure that participation, we have participation from all different kinds of people that are doing this, but that doesn't really address what it is we're preparing them to do.
Well, a bottleneck in almost every regard is workforce. I mean, whether it's a restaurant or getting an electrician or whatever. I mean, all the people who used to do these service things seem to have disappeared. And so somehow we need to wade into this and generate a technologically savvy workforce. So that's serious. That's a bottleneck. That's an opportunity, though, of course, because it's reasonable employment. So that's one of the big challenges, I think, is you're correct, training the workforce. The good news is that can probably be distributed pretty effectively among the various geographic and institutional types of situations. But it would seem to me that we need programs in, I don't know, molecular biology tech, AI tech, sort of educating the people so they can do this stuff is crucial.
Yeah, maybe, maybe that'll also address this problem of, people not wanting to do this kind of research and not wanting to make it a career. And so, the students that we're losing from our graduate program and postdocs and whatnot, if we can create this new pathway to a successful career, then maybe it will help us to, keep the students coming into our labs and postdocs.
Somebody said that chemists do it better. And I think geologists do it better too. As a matter of fact, I think most sciences, well, most what we call hard sciences do it better. Physics certainly does it better. Physics, chemistry, geology. So somehow we need to I think they do it because there's direct pipelines, right? There's direct uses. So somehow we have to demonstrate what are our direct uses. And right now we just it seems like maybe there's too many. There was always medicine, but that's no longer as popular as it was. So there's pharmacology, that's still working. But I don't know, it seems to me that right now the type of crises we're talking about, climate change and, I guess worldwide infections and things like that, they're driven by fear. But they have to be driven by, there's a job there for me in that field. And so I guess we do need companies that are directly approaching this. There are such companies, right? That basically they pay people to carry out certain environmental engineering plans.
Was it Tom that mentioned these new materials that can be manufactured? So one of the things I think about when I think about carbon capture is figuring out all the stuff we can do with the captured carbon. I mean, building materials, I don't know, like different kinds of fabrics that can be used, to harden streets and things like this. I mean, that,
Yeah.
graphite.
I mean, there's, advances now, very recent ones. I'm kind of intrigued by them in, it's not the protein folding problem, it's the inverse problem of protein design. That is de novo novel proteins that have never existed. Well, that has been used heavily in the therapeutics world, but it's just now stepping into a materials world, building proteins that do something like conduct or switch or form, novel fibrous materials. So that's an emerging, it's an opportunity. There's lots of training, lots of compute, obviously, that goes with it. But, this emerging area of designed proteins, just as we talked about engineered cells. So I think de novo things are, that's on the horizon, definitely an opportunity. And there are not that many groups that can do it. That's the other side of this is it is emerging. It's not brand new, but it's expanding.
Are there industries that you know of that do that? Yeah.
It's pretty new, Gretchen. So there's a lot. I know of some because, in fact, Washington Research Foundation funded the research that went into them. But they're all fairly new, fairly startup-y. It's nothing huge, but there's some in sort of novel sweeteners, novel cosmetics that are, things like that. So obviously, cosmetic industry has been drawing on a lot of biomaterials out there, algal and other plant biomaterials. So there's a lot of discovery still to happen. But in terms of novel protein design, yeah, there's some small companies forming. Nothing the size of Genentech or,
Can I make one more comment regarding training? I think we also need to appreciate that our younger generations are starting to have interests which are quite different from the ones we had. And this is at multiple levels. I think many students students that have had some education understand the challenges of climate change, and they understand that they want to be involved in being part of the solution and not only be part of the problem. To me, that's exciting. It is new, and it's also different from what I have been seeing before. And I don't think we're taking advantage of that. And I think we should be really, really, really taking advantage of it in multiple different ways. I mean, one trivial way to do it is to better think about the courses we teach to channel it into that direction, but also in terms of the science we do. I mean, I'm a basic scientist, but can I really motivate anybody to do basic science today when we have these really urgent problems that need to be solved? Anyway, I think it's an opportunity that we haven't been doing much about.
Well, I would say that you can motivate maybe one or two people in the back row or something like that, and you want to motivate them. And the others, I think the kind of training we have been talking about is good to do. So basically, basic tools that do keep changing, and they have to keep up, but they will as long as there's avenues for them and machines to work on and things like that. So as long as they keep up with the technology, and then then there's a few who are going to be creative and really will do what you are thinking of as curiosity-driven science or problem solution science.
Yeah, but I think that's very different. It's purpose-driven science.
Purpose-driven,
again,
sure.
we saw that during COVID, right? How many kids wanted to get into medical school to help be part of the solution space? Okay, we've never seen so many biochemists, microbiologists.
So what you're
I'm just
arguing
going
is
to
that
add just a really quick sort of reflection on this, that there's an emergence of a sort of a novel educational platform that's going around called the stackable certificates. And what this is you can be a biology student, but you can get a certificate in data science. Some very condensed, very focused thing. It has also been now, a lot of universities are offering stackable certificates to industry to increase their advances. So this is building bridges between institutions and industry partners. And you can have these things, stackable certificates in FDA compliance, stackable certificate in legal matters, ethical matters, you know, all of these things that will advance the economy by advancing the sort of the breadth of training that you can get that's very practical. And again, it's being heavily used by people in industry to come back to academia to build further. And that has the advantage of driving connections to academia. So we have a big program with Boeing doing a stackable certificate for their engineers. Same is true for Zymo Genetics.
Wait, can you clarify, Tom? You mean, and so the engineer comes back to you to stack onto his certificate, on their certificate,
On their
and it's not the students gaining
It's either way.
expertise.
It's both. It's both. So both industry, in fact, they collectively work together, industry and students, usually graduate level, but some undergrad, are doing these stackable certificates, and they're very short term, very accessible, very sort of targeted on a specific need.
Yeah, because what I see is people doing, you know, trying to do multiple minors and things like that. But I think it's much better to have something that is actually what you said, Eric. It deals with a purpose or a problem. So basically, you have some sort of certificate in carbon capture. Right. It's something maybe a little bit more modest than that. But yeah.
And they're all run by academic units, which is sort of driving the structure of our loads or foci. So I just think it's another thing that's emerging. It's an opportunity to help build that two-way street between use need and the training that we do, and the students get to meet industry, vice versa.
Yeah, so it's like sort of a purpose-driven educational module.
Yeah, it's growing in a number of institutions around the US, stackable certificates. So you can, if you want to get promoted somewhere, you need, you know, X number of certificates or whatever. I mean, it's a kind of a clever use of our talent and also a clever driver of our focus.
Reminds me of the sort of continuing education requirements that they have for teachers, for doctors, and so on and so forth. It's the same sort of idea.
Yeah.
Demonstrate some new competency.
It's like CME, exactly that. It's a continuing medical ed. Yeah. So again, that was focusing on like opportunities, seemed right. I have a practical question. Hank, are you the reporter?
Well, I've been taking notes.
Because I took no notes.
It's back of the envelope, scribble scratch. I can try to report out, but I'm going to count on each one of you to elaborate on what you. I heard a lot of good ideas, but I don't think I have a stream that, you know, I can report back on. So what I could do is I could just touch on things that we talked about and then invite people to elaborate. How's that sound?
Super. Because I was realizing just now I'm writing little notes to myself, but they're just, oh, bring this up or bring that up. Right. That's great. Thanks, Hank.
You're welcome.
I think, Eric, to go back to the point you were making about, you know, motivating the students, it just emphasizes over and over again the need to have a good grasp of a big picture and put what you're trying to do in a context where people think it's perhaps more than it is, but people see that you're actually thinking towards some sort of societal good.
That's right. That's right. So it forces us a little bit to rethink about how we do education. I mean, I personally think that it is high time for us to rethink how we do education in general. But I think in this case, we could do it in a much more focused way in some ways.
There is a tension. You can all appreciate this, is that as our domain becomes ever more interdisciplinary, the sort of amount that you need to begin to master starts to spread, right? And that's great. The tension is that the one I brought up earlier, and I don't know that this is the venue for it, but students are not entering academia, particularly graduate programs, if they see a really long horizon anyway, right? They want to be of value, and they want to be of value as soon as they can. I mean, Eric, I think that's the new mentality that you're referring to, right?
Yep.
And they're not looking to say, hey, you know, I could be a student for life, which most of us are. So some thought, I think we have to rethink the US higher ed in order to support the bioeconomy and the wishes of the next generation. Eric, where were you trained as a doctoral degree?
In Argentina.
How many years do they typically do?
Typically, it can be a little bit more. I did it in 3.5.
Okay. In in the EU, it's like 3 years.
That's right. And I don't think there's any justification for spending any more time doing a PhD.
But they come in with a different, you know.
That's right. I was just going to say, yes, education starting with elementary school is different.
Yeah, but I would just like to suggest that one bottleneck is the time to degree. And we should look for mechanisms that accelerate that in the US.
Yep.
And I ran into some statistics. Some domains are faster than others, even some subdomains, right? But if you have somebody coming into something where it's not going to earn a lot of money at the end, all right, and it's got a lot of years to get there, the fraction of people that are just driven by passion is not enough. Okay.
Yeah. And just to throw into the mix now, you know, in California and elsewhere, grad students are now paid a good amount to be TAs. And as we probably most of us know, when you're a TA, it takes longer to get your degree. So if becoming a TA is now more attractive than it used to be, that is a disincentive to shorten the term of your graduate program. So.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I just can't help thinking, listening to the last couple of things we've been talking about, is that we really need to change the model, you know, of how we're educating people at the undergraduate level and preparing them for whatever awaits them at the next level. And, you know, that seems to me that's the only way we're going to accomplish the kind of bold things that we're talking about here. Is we spend way too much time, you know, with students doing a 4-year bachelor's degree or 3 or 4, and then, you know, if they go to grad school, it could be, you know, the graduate education plus a postdoc, and that still doesn't position people really well for jobs. So it just seems like we have to change the way that we're training if we're going to start accomplishing really bold things like they're talking about here.
And it plays very deeply into the need for particularly first-gen students and students from under-resourced communities. If it's a long road to income, it's difficult.
Yeah, that's true.
In other words, it becomes an exclusive environment for the privileged, and it's not appropriate. And again, the bioeconomy needs talent. It needs to accelerate things. I think just putting things on boosters is what we need to do. However we do it, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think a point that's important to remember is that this might not be permanent. I think we have some, I mean, technology is moving very fast. So I can't anticipate how things will be looking in 10 years from now. I mean, I really have no idea. And it might be at that point, might be the time to think about going back to where we were, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Right now, we're in the dawn of data-driven discovery is really where we
Yep.
are. It's an exciting time. You know, these large language models are being deployed in new ways. I had a conversation yesterday that the challenge is less about, I mean, this is going to come up in infrastructure, that AI is not constrained by the talent, it's constrained by the hardware at this point and the resource. It's just not enough. And Microsoft, in fact, if you wanted to get time on their cloud, it's all now it's all sucked away by large language models and GPT. So, you know, access is really a problem. But
So
we'll
to
get to that on infrastructure. I'm passionate about democratizing compute, both its training and its access.
To return to something Eric just said, our inability to predict what the world's going to be like in 10 years. It seems to me one of the things that we have to be somewhat careful of is if we're talking about a very vocational set of trainings to prepare people for the current bioeconomy, whatever that is, that bioeconomy isn't going to be the same in 10 years.
Right.
And so we need to include in the training, as I always say to my students, you know, you're not here to learn stuff. You're here to learn how to learn, because the stuff that we know now isn't going to help you in 10 years.
That's right.
And you've got to be able to learn. So that's really the challenge. And it's true, of course, at a PhD level, but it's going to be true in this workforce we're trying to change. And so the CME model has to be an integral part of whatever it is, because whoever we're putting out there is going to have to keep upgrading their training to adapt to whatever the new world is. So we have to build that into whatever model we come up with.
You know, that CME model reminds me another core part of, so my wife was a physician, and there were two parts to it. You have to study and do these credits every year, but you also are expected to attend conferences. And I think the science societies are also an important vehicle for keeping things kind of contemporary and live. So just some sort of attention to them as well.
Okay, so we're at break, and I think we've hashed this out pretty well. We're on a break, and then I think in 15 minutes or so, we'll go back to report out.
Okay.
Hopefully
Well, that
we
was
can
fun.
get back to where we came from.
I like working with you guys. I wish I could be there. You know, I had a flight scheduled for 10 p.m. last night from the West Coast to land at 6, I think, on the East Coast. And I got to the airport and said, oh, flight delayed half hour. And then flight delayed half hour. And then it was delayed. And at 12:30 a.m., flight canceled. And they rebooked me on a 10 a.m. flight out of Seattle, which would have gotten me there tonight.
You'd have missed the best part.
And hassle with the hotel. They didn't want to reimburse the room, blah, blah, blah.
So you just Zoom from the airport today and then.
Well, actually, the meeting, I would be in the air right now.
Well, if you buy a first class ticket, don't you get good internet up there?
Oh, yeah, it's all better on the front of the plane, right?
And the other passengers wouldn't, they'd be amused.
Yeah. Anyhow, I was just, I'm glad to be there, but not there. So I wish I could join you guys.